welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's a podcast host of the Manhattan Prophet, no other than Mr. Aaron Brooks.
Hello, Daniel. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Aaron, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Absolutely. So my podcast, The Manhattan Prophet, is, really an attempt to offer another kind of path to an evolved consciousness, if you will. There are many people who look to enlighten or maybe just enrich their own path, right, through spiritual practices like meditation, psychology, um, ways of living more intentionally. There, I believe, however, has been a massive disconnect for maybe not systemic reasons, but I don't believe people have a full understanding of really the root of their belief systems, how societies have been structured, what kind of the imposing power systems are in place today and were historically, and how that has shaped the way that we live. And I try to bring light to those structures, to those systems, so that people better understand why they're living the way they are and how, in what ways that might impact them, unknowingly, unwittingly, and the ways to evolve from there and look at things differently, and hopefully live better lives for themselves and help the collective consciousness as a whole.
Mr. Aaron Brooks, thank you so much for bringing light to the world through your podcast. How would you define programming in the context of religion, corporations, and media?
Absolutely, it's a great question. I think that the overt kind of example is the Western capitalist system, right, where you have people who are willing to make real, obvious sacrifices with respect to, quite simply, where they're spending their daylight hours, right? So people are willing to exchange 50% of their life to a job to work and sacrifice that time when they could be doing other things. Maybe the profit is placed over anything else, right? So people often associate that way of living or that structure as the matrix, and it's a one-sided trade. I look at it a little bit differently. I look at it as people are consciously giving up a way of living, and they're succumbing to, or they're willing to bend in order to accommodate that lifestyle. And um, you know, in the purest sense, it limits people consciously. It doesn't allow them to see past maybe the consumer based or the material based way of looking at the world. It cuts them off from the from the internal part of them. And interestingly enough, if you look at the root of most religions, especially Abrahamic religions or monotheistic religions, there was an overt push, especially by the Roman Catholic Church, to really focus on kind of a left brain way of viewing the world, which is interesting because you think about religion and you associate it with spirituality, and spirituality really is kind of that right brain feminine way of digesting yourself and the world around you. So it's actually fascinating when you see, even in Judaism with the Deuteronomists, and how there was a focus on law and then patriarchy and ritual based worship. Um, and then again with Catholicism, where you went through the Dark Ages and the even in the ages of Enlightenment, where the Church overtly suppressed this kind of knowledge, the mystical way of understanding the world. It's really shaped people's consciousness that, unwittingly. What we're seeing now is, in modern day neuroscience and quantum physics, is we're seeing a lot of these ideas that existed thousands of years ago and were looked at as mystical finding scientific ground, which is fascinating to me. And hopefully, I'm optimistic that people will be able to make that connection to these mystical ways of understanding ourselves in the universe, consciousness, vibration, and energy, and seeing that there's another layer, right, to themselves, and again, peeling that back and looking introspectively, and trying to understand where they fit in the cosmos.
Indeed, connection, people. What do you think it is important to question the sources that shape our perception and identity?
It's crucial because they really form the basis of your life. And a lot of it, I call it kind of inherited knowledge or inherited truth, where you blindly accept things because either your parents pass it down to you, or people around you in society are doing things. So it's crucial to always question and always keep that curiosity. Without it, you're living unconsciously, you're living robotically, and you're never peeling back the layer. You're never looking past the surface level. And it's very easy, especially in today's world, with social media, with just tablets and movies and Hollywood. It's so easy to get caught into that surface level of existence. So what's crucial, I think, today, especially with pushing for an evolved consciousness, is people to look deeper, to find that curiosity, to look into even what they valued as a child. What was that? What were the things that they really wanted to do? What are the things that they do now? Do those things align? So it's really crucial to go through that process.
Mr. Aaron, what do you think, or what will be objection or vision to the Manhattan Project?
What would be the vision?
Yes.
The vision for me, and my aim really, is to provide people with root knowledge, with root understanding of their value system, of how society has been formed and how that's impacted them. And hopefully, the idea is, when they come to that realization and say, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe there are things that I've assumed to be true but really aren't, or maybe I should be looking at things a little bit differently. That once they make that leap, or rather, once they see that, they're willing to make that leap, because that leap requires a lot of courage. It requires you to, again, to reinvestigate, but also it requires you to make real changes in your life. It forces you to say, look, maybe I'm not spending my time wisely, or maybe I'm not spending my time the way that I really want to be. Maybe I'm sacrificing certain things that at the end of the day, when I really think about it, I shouldn't be. And maybe I was doing these things for reasons I didn't fully understand. So my aim really is to get people to, take a leap of faith in themselves, rather than in systems that have been pushed upon them that they identify with, I believe, incorrectly. And in doing so, again, hopefully, um, create an evolved consciousness that impacts the world in a better way.
Mr. Aaron, let's talk about religious programming. In what ways do you believe religious institutions shape individual identity from an early age?
It's a really good question, and I'll tell you that I'm pretty well versed in religions, and both, again, Abrahamic and Eastern traditions. And it as far as as far as identity, I think identity really is impacted on the way, again, people identify with systems. So, and this is crucial, and I think it's a defect in present day society, where people, again, identify with, I am Jewish, I am Christian, I am Muslim, and therefore I must act this way. It has a really strong impact on people. And what's interesting is, when you boil it down and you look at the root teachings of these traditions, these traditions teach the opposite of that. These traditions really teach that, and again, at the core, that we are all part of a sort of singularity of a oneness of one source, and it's about connecting to that source inside of you. It's not about connecting to an externalized institution of worship, right? This has been a I think byproduct of, again, the institutionalization of religions. And again, religions are living organisms, right? These institutions, they have to do it by way of self-preservation, and people become so indoctrinated with ritual and with identification through ritual that these core teachings, these core principles, no matter who it is, Muhammad, Jesus, Moses, um, again, at their core, it's about this unified identity that we all connect to. And this is obvious in Eastern traditions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism. This is essential. This is about the awareness and the singular sort of connection to the source is really prevalent there. But the Western Abrahamic traditions push people down another course, and it's lent itself in a different way, I think a toxic way, especially in capitalist Western societies, that people can identify pretty easily.
Very well said, Mr. Allen. Beautifully articulated. How can someone begin to discern their personal belief from where they have been taught?
It's a very tough question, and I think that so much has been scripted, so much has been sculpted in how we identify and where we think, or rather, where we come to the idea of who we are, right? In our society, so much is a function of what we do, how much money we have, what our job is, where we went to school, uh, where we live. These are not who we are, right? Who we are is separate from that. Even on a more metaphysical level, our feelings, our thoughts aren't even who we are. But that's kind of taking it to another level. On a more surface level, I think the best way is to look inside of you and find what really makes you happy. If you're working in some corporate marketing job, but your passion is painting, that's who you are. You are an artist, you're a painter. If for me, I was working on Wall Street. I've been working on Wall Street for close to 2 decades, and it really served as a more of a means to an end, as a maybe not so much as a status symbol, but a necessary evil, if you will, in order to accomplish a certain status or make a certain amount of money, which I thought would lead to a certain level of gratification. At the end of the day, I had passions deeply rooted elsewhere. So it's important to look inside of you, embrace what really drives you at your core. It's not the end in and of itself. It's the means to that end that really needs to be focused on instead.
Let's talk about the corporate influence, Mr. Aaron. In what ways does advertising manipulate our self image or desires?
I mean, I think that it's incredible the way that identity and desires and image have been influenced, especially in America. We have, if you look at some of the staggering health figures of people with real mental illness, depression, ADD, uh, just it's created a massive schism, I think, within the individual, where again, people are looking at these idealized ways of living, of identifying, of finding value, of placing value, and it's so far off from where they should be focusing, or where they should be finding value, or where they should be looking for meaning in themselves, that again, it pushes reality into this spectrum that is toxic. And people, it's hypnotizing. People shouldn't be looking to live their life based on the way somebody looks. There's this massive epidemic, I call it, of cosmetic surgery, where people are augmenting their body to match some marketing scheme, or to match the newest social media trend. This to me isn't attractive. This is like a pervasive manipulation, and it's not doesn't need to be systemic. It could be a one-off situation, but when people are seeking um, validation through those types of campaigns, marketing campaigns, media, it will leave them. They'll never be satisfied. It will leave them with a hollow sense of self. So it's. I think that it's. I think that it's added in a really horrific way to a lot of the mental illness that we face.
Mr. Aaron, as a podcast host of Manhattan Project, what are your short term and long term goals?
My short term goals are to create a base, a strong following of people who of like-minded thinkers, or even of people who are looking to think past where they're normally comfortable, and to build a community, and to form communities and connections with other like-minded people where we can make a real impact and impart real change on the collective consciousness. That's, I guess, short term and long term are blended there, but I'd like to. That's kind of my singular focus right now.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Aaron, and
Thank you.
looking forward for more success. Let's talk about the media manipulation. How does mainstream media contribute to shaping public perception and identity?
Yeah, this really strikes the heart of, I think, a major issue right now, which is um, a fractured. I call it a fractured truth apparatus, where mainstream media in many ways has been weaponized and hijacked by special interests, and they have really skewed narratives. They have disseminated disinformation, misinformation, which really in many ways shapes, again, the collective consciousness, where you have, again, overtly, you have um, politically aligned media companies who are covering the same story, but you have starkly different accounts of what's going on. So this isn't hidden. This is out in the open. But what happens is when media companies are pushing narratives that are not fully true or are skewed, it leaves a population wanting and looking and confused, which maybe is the purpose, and maybe that's kind of what the intention is. If there's a sinister intention, I know that it's not always based on monetizing sort of human consciousness, but it it disconnects people from reality, and it leaves them struggling and looking for answers and real truth. They look at 10 different sources and everybody's telling them something different. So you have there were these sacred there were these sacred entities, corporations, institutions that were supposed to be protectors of democracy or protectors of truth, media, government, and these have become fractured, and they've really had a negative impact on people's ability to discern fact from fiction and identify what they should be believing in, and how they should be feeling about real issues that impact them on a daily basis.
Again, Mr. Aaron, very well said. Very well said. Let's talk about awareness and critical thinking. How can people start to unlearn programming they have been exposed to throughout life?
It's a really it's a difficult question to answer, but I think that the best way to deprogram is to look inward and realize that there's more going on to and it's actually funny because it should be so easy, right? It's always there, it's always present. Your internal self is always there. um but we're distracted, we're constantly being pushed and pulled in different directions. We're really always satisfying appetitive desires, or looking to um, accumulate material goods, or accumulate status the the best way to deprogram is really to take a step back and look at yourself and think, wait a minute, why am I doing these things? What are the motivating factors here? Um, and why am I so stressed, or why am I so pushed in one linear direction? Right? It's at its core, if you look at what all the ancient teachings and mystical traditions tell you, is it's really about balance. And I know for a fact that people feel a daily imbalance. They must, because they're being pushed in this sort of left brain way of living their life. So if they can just gravitate towards that realization and think to themselves, why is my life so skewed in this direction? Why am I so focused on work and attaining money and living my life this way? I think it's such a piercing of the veil and a way to begin deprogramming, because you have to start asking yourself and looking introspectively and thinking, what's really important to me, what's really meaningful in my life. But it's a process. It takes courage and it takes time. It's not an easy flick of the switch.
Mr. Aaron, are there any books, documentaries, or thought leaders you recommend on this topic?
Sure. I've read so many texts and books. I think that one book that really stands out for me is Magic Mind by James Doty, or Doty. This is a book about manifestation, and what's unique about it is it's a book that's really focused on using manifestation and neuroscience techniques to improve the collective consciousness, to improve who you are as a member of a society. All too often with other preachers of manifestation, it's all about attaining, again, money or realizing your individual dream. This has a very unique skew to it, and it gives you another perspective. I'm really all about um, expanding my belief system and understanding different ways of incorporating additional ideas or additional ways of supplementing my belief. And this is a great example of that.
Indeed, and thank you for your recommendation. How has your own perception or identity changed as you become more aware of these influences?
Yeah, look, it's really, for me, it's really been about a value shift where I realize that maybe it's with my age or my older age, but you realize how short life is, and then you think about what you're sacrificing in order to achieve uh, your goals, or in order to satiate your ambition. And I think any rational person will realize that if you're working 80 hours a week for 30 years or whatever crazy amount of time it is, and sacrificing these waking hours for these really crucial moments with your children or with your family members, um, to me, it's just so obvious that it's not the right trade, right? It's a sacrifice that everybody, almost, at least in my world, makes unwittingly, and it's accepted. It makes sense that that should be your priority. So for me, it's about reevaluating your value system and my value system, and seeing what I really care about. And again, it's also about looking past the surface and looking internally and saying, listen, what has my focus been? Consciousness and expanding consciousness can get really um, mystical and into these different esoteric fields, which are important and valid. For me, it's so obvious. It's about where are you placing your attention on a daily basis? What is your focus? If your focus is singular or myopic in nature, you're missing out on something. Bottom line, period, end of story. If all you think about is money, you are cutting off an entire side of yourself. So once I was able to come to terms with that sort of obvious realization that I was making sacrifices and seeing what those sacrifices were, my consciousness began shifting dramatically.
Mr. Aaron, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry second season, and book 101 review in its fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and food 101 in its fifth season as well. Geography 101 and love letters are in third season, and my baby podcast Mental Health 101, Music 101, and Movie 101 review in its fourth season, and Sex 101 and Science 101 in its first season. So please do listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Mr. Aaron, what's one message or insight you hope listeners take away from this conversation?
My one message is to think critically, to question, and to not accept. And there's a whole world outside of blind acceptance waiting for you.
Indeed, explore yourself, people, because life is too short and the world is so big. And of course, the universe is infinite. Mr. Aaron Brooks, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. Thank you so much for sharing the Manhattan Prophet. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your podcast itself?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on today.
Yes, indeed. So where they can listen your podcast, Mister?
The Manhattan Prophet is streaming across all platforms: Apple, Spotify, Amazon, iHeart. It's everywhere. Please tune in. I really think you'll enjoy the discourse.
Yes, people, I support Mr. Aaron Books because if you support him, more and more and more empowering episodes to come. So, Mr. Aaron, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon.